Right view is the first step in the Eightfold Path. It serves as the foundation for the path, since without it, none of the preceding steps would be accomplishable. The first set of right views are actually contained in the Four Noble Truths, which in brief state that there is suffering in life. Suffering originates from causes and conditions. There is a means to the end of suffering, and that means to the end is the Eightfold Path. Even at the level of mundane right view, which consists of becoming aware of essential cosmic principles like karma or impermanence, as well as perceiving physical life more or less objectively, the unfortunate truth is that most people in this day and age don't perceive anything with very much accuracy. This is because of the ego. We have, to be precise, about 97 or 98% ego, the majority of people on this planet. So that is conditioning. So that means our consciousness is conditioned 97% by the subconsciousness. So we really just get by in life by doing our best to interpret and translate people and places and all of our experiences. We all do this, and yet all of us come to different conclusions and carry different points of view. That's the problem with wrong view. We don't agree with each other, and we don't see things as they truly are. We don't see reality. If the majority of people on Earth had a well-developed sense of mundane right view, at the very least, we wouldn't be struggling the way we do. We wouldn't be fighting all the time, at home, at school, at work. We wouldn't get confused all the time in relationships, overwhelmed by our partner's criticism, or paranoid about what people think of us or what they think about us, ashamed and uncertain of our self-worth. We wouldn't constantly turn to others for second opinions. We wouldn't be so insecure all the time. We wouldn't have body image problems, because what we'd see in the mirror would be exactly what there is. Nothing else, rather nothing less and nothing more. Have you ever argued with someone over the size of something or the amount of fries you placed in an order that you were making for a customer at work? Or have you ever disagreed with someone about the meaning of another person's joke? I'm sure we all have. Or the meaning of someone's explanation. Or about whether or not so-and-so's face turned red in this situation, or whether or not somebody's tone meant that they were angry. So many misinterpretations, different interpretations, so much nuance and subtlety. When do we ever really know? We don't. We always have to guess about everything we perceive. Make the best guess and estimate based on so many things: our experience, our knowledge, and our intrinsic perception. If the majority of people had right view, all of us would see eye to eye, and most of our problems would be solved. Because it's one of the fundamental causes of suffering is ignorance. And that ignorance is not just not knowing things, it's also just seeing inaccurately, which is a form of delusion. So this is a possible attainment, though, seeing clearly and for everyone to be on the same page, to be more awakened. That's what is required. It's a possible attainment at both the individual level and as well as a mass group or a collective consciousness. We can categorize perception into two primary types: egoic perception and conscious perception. Egoic perception is conditioned and subjective. Conscious perception is unconditioned and objective. that's objective. So with egoic perception, consciousness still exists, and that's of course the very power that allows us to perceive in the first place. The distinction is that consciousness within egoic perception is trapped and modified in many different ways because of the ego. One analogy for this is to think of consciousness as a pure, white, bright light. If you were to place a translucent color filter over that light, the color of that light would change and even dim slightly, because the filter is specifying that light to only reveal a specific color band or frequency, that range, and hide the rest. And because you're adding layers of filters in front of this light, that you're also reducing the light itself. You're making the light less dim, less strong, and the colors are becoming quite intense. Now imagine what that flashlight would look like if you were to place hundreds of color filters and lenses in front of it. The light would become extremely discolored. It would go from bright colors to secondary colors, and then finally to just these dim, dull oranges and burgundies and browns. The light would be very distorted and dim. You may not even be able to use it. And furthermore, whatever you shine that flashlight on would look completely different than how it should look during the day. Now, conscious perception is the opposite of this. Conscious perception is just like a pure, white, bright flashlight, but without color filters, without filters of any sort. So it is not modified or limited by these conditions of these filters, conditions of any kind. That is why it shines so bright, and you can use it anywhere, and everything will look the way it's supposed to. There are no obstructions in front of it, so you can see clearly. And to answer the question, this humanity has very perverse wrong view, because our consciousness is heavily conditioned by these filters. Not color filters, of course, but the ego. What are known as samskaras in Sanskrit, or khandhas in Pali. And just like a flashlight with an excess of color filters and lenses covering the light source, over the past few thousand years, because we lost the teaching hundreds of years ago, we lost the real meaning of the teaching. We became less religious over time, more secular. Because religion became corrupt over time. As a result, consequently, our consciousness has become increasingly weaker and dim, because religion and spirituality is it's a doctrine of the consciousness, ultimately, of the heart and mind. So we've become hypnotized by sights and easily distracted. That's what happens. And that light of consciousness, which was originally much more awakened than us back then, is now very weak. It doesn't have the focus it used to. This is the reason why so many mild cases of neurological disorders like ADD and autism and Tourette's and Asperger's are being diagnosed everywhere these days. The Venerable Master Samael Onvaor explained this very specifically in a number of his books. He mentioned more than once that the state of consciousness of modern people is 97% conditioned by psychic aggregates, by the ego. That leaves us with only 2 or 3% of free objective consciousness available for us to utilize and see through, to try to see things as they are, to see reality. So since we have so much conditioning in our psyche, there are a few major ways wrong view or misperception occurs in us. Eastern religions talk about the 5 skandhas. Again, the word is the same word, but it's slightly different meaning. So skandhas, and synonymously samskaras. So they are both the defilements, but also the archetypal structures for consciousness. And among these structures, there are elements, the 4 elements, or the 5 elements, if you include intuition. So water, earth, air, fire. And other elements or aspects of this structure, these structures, these samskaras, which are responsible for different functions of perception, like perceiving sensation and perceiving form and perceiving sight and sound and stuff like that, or perceiving thoughts. So in Buddhism, they're called samskaras or khandhas. Many names for these. The term means aggregates or groupings. The 5 samskaras are psychological aspects that produce the various functions of consciousness, like thinking and feeling. So they have the basic elements of nature as well. In the West, most people are more familiar with the concept of the 4 elements of nature, which are earth, water, air, and fire, as I mentioned. So the 5 samskaras have this as well. They're a bit more than that. It's not just the elements. And Eastern religions more frequently include the 5th element, known as prana. This is the most subtle and refined natural element, which is responsible for providing energy and health to living organisms. It's the life force. And it also is responsible for intuition. The Western occult term for this is ether. So the mind consists of 5 samskaras, which are organized into 4 natural elements and 1 subtle element. So when it comes to our psychological makeup, all of us are born with different amounts and combinations of the 5 samskaras. This is the innate factor that predisposes us to perceive things differently. In addition to the elements, because the elements are related with astrology, the 5 samskaras also express themselves through the 12 zodiac signs. So let's look at what's at work here. There are 12 zodiac signs that belong to 4 terrestrial elements of nature. There are 3 zodiac signs per element to equal 12. 3 that belong to water, 3 that belong to earth, 3 that belong to air, and 3 for fire. Then there is the 5th element, which is intuition, which is not affected. It is both energy or prana and consciousness itself. It is not affected. Now, the way this applies to the human psyche is through 3 placements. Now, the way that astrology applies to the human psyche, the way that astrology affects, the astrology that affects the human personality in particular are primarily through 3 placements. It's not directly affecting the whole natal chart of somebody. These placements are your sun sign, which is the month and day a person is born, the moon sign, which for us makes up nearly our entire subconsciousness, right? Because we are 97% ego, and because subconsciousness or ego is a lunar force, and the ascending or rising sign is another part of our personality. That's how the sun is moving. throughout the day. So it's the time and degree at which the sun is rising during birth. But the rising sign, however, doesn't have a substantial influence over our personality, really, when you compare it with the sun and moon signs. The sun is the expression of a person, the main expression and disposition and some taste and way of thinking, the outward personality, and the moon sign is the inner personality, the thoughts and the deep emotions and the emotional taste, the values, deep-rooted values, and also desires, and lots of desires and fears are coming from the moon sign as well. But the rising sign is it's subtle, you can feel it. It's like a 10% of influence. It's like a dash or a spice in a dish. It doesn't change the dish into a different kind of dish. It just adds some extra flavor, if you will. This composition of natural elements and zodiac signs is organized further as such. Each sign is measured using 30 units or degrees of travel. So your sun sign contains much of your outward personality and self-expression and taste and perception. However, nature rarely creates things with clear and defined borders. Everything grows and changes gradually in a spectrum. So our astrological personality placements tend to contain influences from what are known as cusp signs, which are the nearest signs at both ends of measuring points. So for example, if you were born in December, you're a Sagittarius. That's your sun sign. But if you were born specifically on the 21st, then that means you were born right at the cusp between Sagittarius and Capricorn. Therefore, your sun sign traits would carry almost an equal amount of influence from both signs. The cusp sign is about 3 or 4 degrees away from the other. That's a true cusp. 3 degrees is a true cusp. But really, even 6, 7, and sometimes people with 8 degrees away from a different sign, they still receive a strong influence from that other sign. So I personally call that just a strong influence. They have a strong influence of that other sign. Now, the moon sign and descendant work in the same way, except that they travel and change at different rates than the sun sign. The sun sign is traveling, it's a monthly thing. The moon sign changes pretty much daily. And then the sun, the rising, is by the hour. So when a person is born, a few combinations of astrology can occur. A lot of the time we come across people with a cusp somewhere, either in the sun or the moon, and then their other sign happens to be full spectrum, meaning that there is no influence, little to no influence from the neighboring signs. And much of the time, the signs are coming from different elements. So this kind of person has a relatively balanced arrangement of energies and elements, because they almost carry all 4 natural elements. But in some cases, you'll come across people who are very balanced psychologically, and they have all 4 elements almost equally distributed by their cusps. So their sun sign is a cusp and their moon sign is a cusp. Maybe their rising is a cusp. But this kind of looks like quarters. If you look at the sun as one half of your personality and the moon as another half. So essentially they have each different element in quarters that make up their personality, their intrinsic personality. People like this tend to be really balanced and well-rounded. They are receiving and transforming impressions evenly throughout the 4 elements in their mind. So these kinds of people can have many different interests and tastes. They tend to be more rounded. There's a side of them that's very intellectual, that can think really well. There's a side of them that's very emotional. There's a side to them that's materialistic, but also very practical. and grounded with self-control, like the reliable side. And there's a side to them that is independent and self-assured, that can speak up or take action in their life. So this combination of energy gives you all the traits that humans have mixed together, and it will allow you to be good at any skill reasonably, from physics to social work. And the next thing you'll see sometimes in people is an overabundance of the same element or the same sign. You'll get double and triple signs sometimes, people with the same sign for some reason. It's very strange, and it's less common. I mean, those kinds of people are everywhere, but it certainly is less common to have so much of the same element or the same sign. Yeah, and with maybe a lack of other elements, it has to be a lack of other elements too. This can happen either because the person is a double or triple sign, as I said, or it could be in the form of, let's see, 2 or 3 of their signs coming from the same elements. So if it's all water, if you have 3 parts, actually I should say a couple parts water, then it could be, Cancer on one end and Scorpio on another. You could be a Scorpio sun and then moon in Cancer, rising in Pisces. That's a triple water sign. So different signs, same element. In this example, they're all water, but it's not uncommon to find people with an overabundance of just a couple elements. So it's out of the 4, right? The majority of people predominantly carry somewhere around 3 elements in their psyche, coming from, the majority of people predominantly carry 3 elements in their psyche. Many people do only carry a couple elements, just, something like fire and earth, or just water and air. And some people have all 4 in almost equal quarters. So then, now that we've gone over our psychological makeup, the intrinsic personality, because of these archetypes that our consciousness is kind of put in or finding itself in, how do these archetypes or filters influence our perception? The water element is responsible for giving us rich human emotions and intuitive creativity. It's an energy that gives us that warmth that allows us to intimately connect and bond with people and enjoy people's company and just appreciate people and have an appreciation and kindness toward living creatures. Water also gives us a stronger innate ability to feel conscious emotions like remorse and compassion and empathy. This element is feminine, and it's nurturing, it's detail-oriented. Now, too much water can hinder rational thinking. It can cause breakdowns whereby people shout or cry out of stress. For water, usually crying because it's the element of emotion. This leads to, and so because it's a detail sign, so it leads to, when that's out of balance, there's excessive attention to detail. As also, when you're detail oriented, you zoom in. Your perception actually zooms in on things, whether it's visual or if it's a sensation or situation. So there's exaggerated perception when that happens. Things look more significant than they really are. Perfectionism, overthinking, And ultimately, this when the water is out of balance, this causes us to take things too seriously. Air is the element of intellect. It enlivens us with ideas and excitement and sociability. It also provides us with a greater capacity for logical and rational thinking. And that's what it also allows us to communicate with structure and grammar and to make sense when we speak. Air is the element of communication as well. And it's a very active, expansive, open-minded, independent. So it can, when you have that energy, you feel like you trust your own decisions. You don't doubt yourself as much. You like the things you do. And it's a masculine energy. It encourages us to inquire and experiment. It helps us open our minds to new possibilities and different perspectives. And yet, an overabundance of cool air can chill the warmth of the heart. Since air is a very active energy, too much of it can make a person restless and easily bored. And since it's not an emotional element, that overabundance can also make a person very superficial and emotionally inexperienced and therefore immature. People like this grow up solving all of their problems using their intellect. So they rarely allow themselves to deeply experience and sit with heavy emotions like grief, depression, and anger for very long. They don't do that. As soon as something goes wrong, their mind jumps to the problem solving, and very soon they've got some clever way to make their emotions subside, to make them feel good again. So people like this don't know what it's like to hold a grudge on someone for many years. They'll tell you just let it go, and you can't. They don't get it. They don't know what it's like to feel the endless pain that comes from being angry at a person for years and always wanting to take revenge, but not being able to, or to talk or find closure and not being able to. That feeling we get when we do that, when we go through that kind of trauma. So air just doesn't know they don't know the depression that follows after having wasted your years on something like a trauma like that. Or just because one person did one thing that was really bad, that was really traumatizing and unexpected and uncalled for or offensive to you, like almost a lifetime ago. So although air helps expand the mind to new perspectives, it can actually make it hard to maintain the same point of view, in fact, or interest on something. Like a problem, problems can be let go easier because you lose interest in the problem, but also interests themselves in hobbies and things and partners. So it can lead us to stop taking important things, very important things like careers or relationships, seriously. Air does not obsess over insubstantial details, but instead allows us, so it's the opposite of water, right? It's not a detail-oriented energy. It allows us instead to prioritize and get things done faster and more efficiently by putting things into perspective and seeing the bigger picture and seeing things as a whole and doing things that are important, the main significant things in our life, handling those and not being so concerned about details. Because noticing details is part of being empathic and nurturing. Like when you see when you pay attention to a baby and you can see the different ways that they cry or make the sounds that they make and the way they breathe, you have to be observant to be able to take care of a baby and notice these things. But air is not so much, doesn't so much have that. Now, earth is the element of construction and organization and physicality. Earth gives us the ability of craftsmanship and practical action. Along with this, Earth makes us grounded so that we can maintain the dedication and focus that we need to carry through with projects and goals. And like water, Earth is a detail-oriented feminine energy that is stable and reliable. So for this reason, both Earth and water are morally strong elements. People of stable energy who do not let you down because they're very serious about their responsibilities. They take things seriously. They're marriageable. They don't get bored easily. Earth is not a restless, active energy in the way that air is, always needing to travel and socialize. The only thing Earth signs do is constantly, craft, stay at home and craft things. These are crafty people. They're always working on stuff, but it's nowhere really far, like in a different country or with other groups. So it's the most constructive and physical. That's why you see Earth-dominant people always crafting and gardening and building things at home, shopping and working out and renovating their homes. They have a taste for material things, very strong taste. But all the elements have their imbalances. Too much Earth causes fastidiousness because it's a detail-oriented sign, right? If you're a craftsman, you're super observant. You can become fastidious. You can zoom into things too much and take things too seriously. Your nature is to be stable, but if a problem happens and you can't solve it, you will get stubborn about it and you'll grudge. So that's a really bad one. Grudging, vengefulness, there's materialism, and complacency. Again, too much attention to detail leads to perfectionism, over criticism, and pettiness. Too much influence from the rupa samskara can lead to materialism and superficiality. Determination can lead to stubbornness, if that's out of balance. Or the inclination toward a stable lifestyle can lead to complacency. No desire for change. Lastly, there's the fire element. Fire enlivens us with passion and zeal, independence and intuition. And like air, fire is a masculine and independent energy, meaning that those who have it have an innate ability to think for themselves and do things their own way, without losing self-certainty and becoming insecure about what others think of them. That's the true deep meaning of independence. It doesn't just mean that you can do things by yourself. It means you can do things your own way and think for yourself and believe in yourself and not get insecure over the details. So similar to air, fire energy does not become overly concerned with details. It's not a perfectionist element. It's kind of eye-opening when really insecure perfectionist people realize that the only reason they're struggling to maintain their image or feel good with themselves is because they're perfectionists by nature, and they think some of these people are trying to imitate others of a certain demeanor, and they don't realize those people you're trying to imitate are so amazing and they seem perfect because they're not perfectionist. That's what makes them so good at what they do. And that's what makes them so good at what they do. So this independence and courage are the most empowering characteristics of fire. Now, fire is not the element of emotion, but it is the element of passion. So likewise, people with a lot of fire can be reactive, and they tend to get angry very easily. I'm using the word passion in the Eastern context. It doesn't mean that you're passionate about your archery or your cooking career. The word refers to intense animal passions like anger, desire, and lust. So anger and narcissism, whether deliberate or accidental and reactive, are the primary imbalances of fire. How does this affect perception? The Buddhist texts explain that anger is a hindrance because it distorts perception dramatically. It can make perception ruthless, where you want things to be black and white, on or off, take it or leave it. They come in or they get kicked out. Not only does anger cause distortion, but the moment you become angry, instantly your nervous system kicks in and your body begins damaging itself little by little as it excretes adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones. This directly affects the vital body or etheric body, which is the very interface we need in order to see anything clearly in meditation. The vital body has to be still as a pond in order to see with clairvoyance. It's like a lubricant and a fuel. It's like oil in a car, but it's also like if the car were made of electricity and wires, it's the fuel as well. It's both the vessel and the fuel. So that's one of the most obvious forms of misperception right there, the inability to see anything in meditation because you're angry or agitated. Another thing that happens when we're angry is that we become impatient and begin to feel the need to take things for ourselves, even though just a moment ago we were practicing loving kindness. And at the same time, too much anger causes us to lose our ability to think. Really substantially loses our ability to think rationally because our brain starts getting into that fight or flight response. It just shuts down the intellect and we start acting on impulses. This is why all of us perceive reality differently. Even when we experience the same upbringing, the same cultural conditioning, and so on, the external factors that affect the way we look at things, like the era we were born in, the towns we grew up in, the parents we were raised by, the schools we went to, and the jobs we've had, just add another layer of complexity to our situation, our otherwise intrinsic predisposition in our perception. So influence is coming from both our nature and our nurture. Now I'll summarize the characteristics of each of the 5 samskaras or skandhas, since I didn't go over them earlier. And as well, I'll explain the different kinds of wrong view and right views in Buddhism. So these terms are Sanskrit. There is rupa, which relates to physical matter, and other similar types of form that we can sense in other dimensions. So this is the physical perception, form perception. Since these things don't exist, outside of ourselves, right? This is all about perception. These are not necessarily things that exist out there, but sort of templates that allow us to perceive in different ways. And without the perception, essentially the thing doesn't exist for us. But that's another topic on philosophy altogether. So the next one, there's another one, there's the Vedana, which is responsible for feeling. These are feelings, which in this context means sensation in general. It's the ability to perceive with all of the senses. Then there's Samma, which relates to perception itself, as well as thinking and discrimination. This kind of perception is conditioned at the level of the samskaras, however. It is not the conscious perception that we have when we're in samadhi. Samskara is our volition or willpower. It gives us impulses and allows us to act on our decisions. And lastly, there's vijnana, which is consciousness itself, which provides us with objective perception, discernment, right? Superior discernment. and universal knowledge. Now, much more can be said about each psychic template, but the important lesson about the samskaras is that these are significant filters. It teaches us that all we are as at the individual level, as an individual self, is an arrangement of aggregates that specify and filter consciousness, how we perceive. That is what samskara means. Not necessarily filter, but it means groupings, aggregates, heaps, or collections. And each samskara is the root of thousands of related aggregates that are all in conflict with one another and abide in different levels of the mind, each one with its own preference. The samskaras accumulate gradually. I'm talking more specifically about the not the original 5 skandhas or samskaras, but within those, the expansion of those, the egos, those exist in the tens of thousands or more. They accumulate gradually, lifetime after lifetime. And every time we feed a desire or fulfill a condition or attachment, and by acting on desires and conditions, we increase those egos. We collect them, we make them bigger and make them stronger gradually over time. And at the same time, these egos are where the causes are found. So we collect karma as well, in proportion to our actions and the makeup, the psychological makeup of our mind. Now, without these 5 aggregates and without karma, we would not exist the way we do today. Physically, individually, and in constant pursuit of satisfying these conditions that we think make us happy. Now, back to view. There are 2 types of right view. There is mundane right view and supra-mundane or ultimate right view. Some depending on the context, some people will use the term absolute truth. So the Buddhist concept of anatta, for example, teaches us the true nature or true self-essence of all beings in existence, which is not found in the individualized selfhood. So the true existence, the true nature is not in individuality or the sense of self that we have of the samskaras. Since the an in anatta means not or without. So the term means not self, or that which is different from the individual self. The term then that refers to our true self, our true nature, is atta in Pali, or atman in Sanskrit. So to discover this right view on selfhood is really astonishing and profound as a realization, because to experience that truth and not simply understand it intellectually entails experiencing a much higher state of consciousness. The jhanas or samadhi states. Then you can see for the first time in your life that everything that you thought was you and part of you and your character, your personality, what you thought was your name and your body, your gender, your hair, your emotions, your style, your taste in music, was never the real you all along. Those are all layers of you, ultimately illusory. Now, in the cycle of vital points, Master Padmasambhava said that the view is an unbiased and vast pervasiveness, free from center and edge. So let your mind essence be uncontrived. So from the perspective of bodhisattvas, such as he, right view is the ability to perceive and maintain the awareness of the insubstantiality and impermanence of all things. This is more than mundane right view. This is the awakened perception of supramundane right view. It can sometimes come from experiences that happen to wake us up and give us really immediate comprehension at a certain level of the mind, but it otherwise develops as we awaken consciousness and eliminate the ego. Because when you think about it, what really makes up you? If you are impermanent, but the consciousness continues, there are so many layers. We think that we're the body. We think that we're our appearance. But as soon as we go into the astral plane, for example, in the dream world, we look different. We feel different. We're a different size and everything. So then you can start asking yourself more and more, is this who I am? Is this my true nature? And you go into higher states, you start to lose that form altogether. So it becomes more clear that you were never that form. The form is not who you are, neither your name. Because then when you consider impermanence, well, we go through many lives. So at some point, that name that you have right now will end, but you will continue. So was, the you right now with this name, or the you in the past, the real you? It's impermanent. It will change. The physical body will expire, and then you'll have a new one. You'll look different. You'll have a different name. Is that the real you now? So this continues on until you realize that ultimately, the you think you are as an individual does not exist. It's impermanent. It doesn't have intrinsic existence. So insubstantiality, anatta, comprehending non-self, the lack of individual selfhood, and impermanence, comprehending impermanence, which is anicca. Because with this kind of awareness comes also compassion for all the other beings in samsara who do not have right view and therefore suffer because of it. Suffer because they're attached to themselves, they're attached to now, their current life, they're so invested in their life. They're living as if they only have one life, they're invested in themselves and everything. So the Eightfold Path is at service of right view, which is found in the Four Noble Truths. Right view is like the seed of a fruit. Without the seed, the fruit would not exist. The treading the Eightfold Path without right view is like walking through a forest at night. You wouldn't be able to see clear enough to get back home. And with that being said, we have to live with a lot of wrong view as we carry along the path to liberation, since that is the level at which we're at. So Buddhism offers some good practices to help us cultivate right view, the primary one being meditation. When we look at how living with cosmic virtues affects us physically, we can see that even the body responds substantially to right view. There is an evolutionary pattern of nerves that respond very well to the superior emotions that arise out of right view. The nervous system maintains its relaxed state when our view is harmonious, and when we experience supramundane right view, typically when we're in samadhi during meditation. So we're activating neurological circuits in the brain and nerves in the body that we rarely use otherwise. Circuits that only a small percentage of people access on a regular basis. And when we experience wrong view, we get upset and we get angry or anxious, and the body seizes up and malfunctions. Things like cognition and digestion shut off. So wrong view causes all sorts of problems, all of our problems. Any misperception at all is delusion. It can come from superficial beauty, it can come from a fantasy, over-optimism or pessimism, and not looking at the facts, from being deceived, or from bursts of passion. We can become judgmental when we're bitter, or we can become obsessed for something, over something or someone with not much reason. We might think that something is amazing, but actually when you look at it, it's commonplace. Wrong view causes uncertainty and consequently insecurity and paranoia. So in Buddhism, the list of wrong views is called the 4 inversions of perception, mind, and view. They are taking impermanence as permanence, taking suffering as happiness, taking non-self as self, and taking non-beauty as beauty. And there's also something called the 4 upright perceptions, which is the same list, but except the states and conditions are reversed. We reconstruct everything we see and experience and see things that don't exist. Nearly everything we perceive is misconstrued in some way because our consciousness is conditioned. That's why we say that we live in a subjective reality, or we have relative truths. And we always say, I may, don't take my word for it, but this is just my opinion. We just live in a sea of opinions. So our reality is relative to our level. Mundane right view is necessary. However, it's a slight reliability that we have in being able to kind of agree, more or less be on the same page in order to understand conventional reality, which is what we are most familiar with. It's the rules of a community, the social norms, things like that. But supramundane right view is needed to understand ultimate reality, of course. So as far as Buddhist texts go, the requisite for right view is to choose between views. And actually, I'll get back to mundane right view. Some examples are having norms within cultures. Every culture has their social norms, and most of the people of that culture agree with it. It's true for that culture. But it's relative because it's so dependent on the time and the place and the culture, and it changes. It's not that reliable, really. It changes over time. So anyway, as far as Buddhist texts go, you have to choose between views. So there is no requirement to prove what happens after death, for instance. The scriptures say, they say this because it's more important to just make a choice about whether or not you have faith in truths like rebirth and suffering. Because to wait for science to prove everything absolutely is not a good idea. You can't do that. It takes lifetimes. The Buddha also encouraged the cultivation of joy in the form of a loving kindness, or piti. He didn't say that we have to maintain a state of cold, indifferent, emotionless self-observation, because that's just the first step of self-control, emotional restraint. It's missing loving kindness. It's missing warmth and joy. In our daily practice, we should strive to experience the flood of joy and well-being that arises from mundane right view, and develop this joy and concentration such that we can eventually experience the higher supramundane right view in the jhanas or samadhi meditation, samadhi being the fourth jhana. So this is something you have to develop. So here are some examples of mundane Buddhist right views, some more examples here. Right view towards the truth of suffering and dangers is to have concern and awareness, not fear and anxiety. Another one is that there is mother and there is father in cosmically. So what this is saying is that all living souls have, in fact, a mother and father. These are eternal guardians, eternal mother and eternal father, because parenthood is always necessary for growth, even for things like minerals and plants. This isn't always the case physically or outwardly, since, as we can see, many creatures in nature, like fish or bacteria or mollusks, don't receive nurturing from their parents. But when you investigate deeper, you'll find that every soul indeed has an eternal mother, which is the Tathagata Garbha within them, the Divine Mother, Tara in Buddhism, which is the human consciousness, the human essence. And they also have an eternal father who is the Atta, or Atman, the being. In Gnostic terms, the being or the nomad, not nomad, the monad, the innermost, the intimate. Another truth states that there is this world and there is a world beyond. This is the conviction of life after death, or rebirth. And another truth states that there is generosity and there are results from it. So generosity being a superior law, like the law of sacrifice. This is saying that generosity should be recognized as a cosmic virtue. It shouldn't be viewed with doubt, like it's some obscure tradition from a long time ago that made someone made their rule of generosity up and now we should just disregard it. It's just some tradition that didn't mean anything. That way we can keep all of our possessions and things. No, it's intrinsic to existence. It perpetuates dharma, the opposite of karma. Another right view asserts that self-observation and mindfulness of the present moment does not require concern with time, either of the past or the future. It's a matter of concentration. Well, because really time is all happening at once. It's not linear. So how do we develop right view after all this, now that we have an idea of what it is? Well, the Buddha once said something important about what we should do with any kind of information that we come across. What he said was this. He said, "Do not believe anything simply because you've heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe anything simply because it's found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But only after observation and analysis, when you find that things agree with you because of reason and are conducive to the benefit of others, should you accept it and live by it." This is a very good reminder about all the countless things we read and hear about every day, especially in this information age. You're never guaranteed that something is true until you see it for yourself, but so much of the time we can't see it for ourselves. And there's so much contradictory information out there. Everybody is saying something different about the same thing. So when the Buddha states that we should always analyze and scrutinize information, what he's actually referring to is not just thinking about it, making sense of it, or running experiments, but he's referring to meditation, analyzing in meditation. Scientific experiments are not always practical or possible, especially for everyday people. Therefore, meditation, tapping into the conscious field, getting information from the cosmic library, is the best way to confirm anything. It is remarkable that all of us have this psychic power, ability, that allows us to just know the truth of things. We can all see eye to eye this way. In addition to this, the Buddha also thought that we should not invest in what he called the sign of things. The sign of the beautiful, the sign of the ugly, or the sign of pleasant and unpleasant situations. This includes the pleasant feeling we get from material gain, or the sign of something. So this term is kind of interesting. It was his term for the endless false concepts, in other words, and labels and meanings that we create and associations we make with things. So instead, we have to get used to seeing things as they are, without biases from the ego, without preference or taste or judgment or being critical. We just have to see things as objectively as we can. Because, the ego tends to either really like something or prefer something or really dislike something. And this is not an accurate way of seeing. In relationships, for example, we might hold on to the expectation that someone will change one day. And out of that expectation, we might carry a false hope for them. Well, what if they don't stop their problem, their alcoholism or their abuse? Then that hope was a sign or a misinterpretation of something that seemed beautiful but was really a fantasy. So with this, whenever we're dealing with conflicts and confusion, we should always just look at the facts. That's how we avoid the sign. I find it's kind of a strange term, but basically, that's how we avoid the bias or the preference towards something. That's how we avoid the negativity or the positivity of something and just look at it how it is. So looking at the facts, whether they're coming out of direct observation or from something like a legal document, is basically best in this world. Because the worst thing that we do to ourselves and others is assume and theorize based on nothing. And so much of the time, people actually believe concepts in their head that they made up. They thought that something might be like this, and then they just started believing it. Just from some images and thoughts that went into their mind. They had an impression of someone, and then they started actually believing some stories about them. And it's not true at all. They haven't seen the person do these things. They're not facts. They're just theories, concepts, and beliefs with no basis. And we do this even more and in a worse way when we're emotionally charged, like when we're upset. We start getting ideas about some people, and we either suspect it's really true or we just completely believe it's true because we just trick ourselves like that. Nothing but a few paranoid observations that serve as our evidence, but not actual proof. So maybe we started work with someone one day and they walked in and they didn't say hi to us, didn't start a conversation with us, and immediately we began assuming that they don't like us or care about us. Well, these kinds of things happen sometimes, and when I heard this example from one of my managers, she told me that she was very preoccupied that day. So she didn't say hi. She just got right to work. she didn't have the energy or time to talk. She didn't think it was a big deal because she works there all the time. There's lots of people there. She can't always say hi to everyone. And has already talked to everyone a lot, so there's not much more to say. So one day she came in and didn't say hi to this person. And that wasn't how the other person took it. The employee felt so rejected that day, she called the head chef, crying about how the manager doesn't like her. As for myself, I saw the truth of that situation because the manager told me the fact of how she actually felt that day. Maybe it was a bit inconsiderate that she didn't say hi, but she had nothing against her, that employee. You can't really make these conclusions all the time, or those judgments, and those biases. And of course, many of our biases are revolving around ourselves. For example, for people who are really insecure and self-concerned, a lot of things you say, they just automatically worry that it's about them, right? Even though you don't actually say that it's about them. But for example, you say, you put up a sign at work, like a literal sign, like in a dish pit, and it says, it says whatever it says about the cutlery. And then someone walks in, you say, hey, can you see that sign there? Can you read that sign? And the person says, oh no, it's fine. I didn't put the dishes in this pit here. I just left them out. And I left them out of the soaking bin. And then you say, yeah, and then, right, what happened there was that they took it personally. They thought you were accusing them of putting the items in the wrong bin. And really, you weren't. What did you ask them? You asked them if the sign is legible. Can you see that sign? Is it readable? Is it noticeable? Is it big enough? That's all you were asking. But people make things about themselves like that all the time. It's a big misperception. So ideas, concepts, imagination, assumptions, theories, backed by and fueled by what's worse with emotions, these are all just fantasies. And they're more perverse with emotions, right? When we're angry, they get even worse. We cannot draw conclusions from them. So some rules that I like to personally follow is if they didn't say it, don't think it, right? If they didn't say that criticism about you, then you shouldn't assume that they're thinking it. Because most of the time, it's just our own paranoia talking. Just our own perfectionism or insecurity. Another thing is to communicate well. If you're uncertain about something, then just be upfront with the person and ask them what they meant by what they said. Or what they did. Instead of assuming what they mean. Then at the end of the day, after we've collected some impressions to look into, we meditate. And since we're working on developing right view, the type of meditation we need is retrospection or analytical meditation. This is known as vipassana. Serenity meditation will give you other kinds of insights, whatever your higher self thinks is important, and that's good. But if you want to learn about a specific problem, then you need to meditate on the problem itself. You don't want a general mindfulness meditation or serenity meditation.